Welcome to the channel, Cheating Secrets. Jerry Kilroy answered his cell phone. Hello. Jerry, it's me. It was Kelly, Jerry's older sister. Her voice sounded tense. Hi, Kelly. What's going on? It's about Dad. He's gotten worse. I had to call you. Jerry tensed up. His father had just turned 68 when he had a heart attack 3 months ago. He successfully underwent triple bypass surgery, stayed in the hospital for a week, and was discharged once his condition stabilized. What happened? Jerry asked. He was fine when I visited him after he got out of the hospital. I know. But, he fell into a depression. The doctor said he had a stroke. A stroke. Damn, Jerry exclaimed. But just last week the doctor was sure he was doing well. I thought he recovered and was feeling okay at home. He is at home. I mean, at Uncle Tony's, of course. The stroke was reportedly minor, but given his poor health, even a minor stroke was serious. Oh yeah, that's bad, he replied that he knew that his parents had moved in with their friends, the Blaylocks, after his father's surgery. His father had always been the stronger partner in the marriage. He was the rock his emotionally fragile mother leaned on. Jerry had remembered since he was young that his mom never handled stress well. So when her husband had a heart attack, it wasn't surprising that she turned to her old friend Agnes Blaylock and her husband, Anthony. Though they weren't blood relatives, they had always been close family friends. Jerry, Kelly, and his other sister, Katie, considered the Blaylocks almost part of the family. They had all grown up calling him Uncle Tony and his wife Aunt Agnes. Yeah. It's bad, Jerry. I've never seen him like this. You need to come. Dad really needs us right now, Mom too. I'm sure he does, he agreed. All right, let me talk to Olivia. Though I'm not sure she can get away from work. I might have to come alone. All right. Hurry if you can. Dad's not doing well. How's Mom? There was a pause before Kelly responded hesitantly, she's fine. That sounded odd, Jerry thought. He expected her to elaborate more. Instead, there was another long pause before Kelly spoke again in a serious tone. I need to talk to you about something. It's very important. Really? What is it? I don't want to talk about it over the phone. I'll tell you when you get here. Just text me when you're close. I need to speak with you alone before we see Dad. That sounds mysterious. Can't you give me a hint? Just get here as soon as you can. I'll fill you in when you arrive. All right. See you soon, then. Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate it. I can't wait to see you. Me too, Kelly. See you soon. Jerry hung up the phone. It was a strange way for their conversation to end. He couldn't imagine what she needed to tell him that she couldn't say over the phone. He would just have to find out later. Jerry knew that his father's health hadn't been very good lately. He had never liked going to the gym and didn't have a regular exercise routine. However, for many years he had worked hard as an auto mechanic. He was drafted right after high school, went through military training, and repaired military vehicles during his tour in the Vietnam War. Even though Frank Kilroy hadn't seen combat, he was always proud of his military service. He never talked about it with anyone outside the family. Even among relatives, he only rarely mentioned anything about it. If asked, he always said that serving was his duty, and he was proud of it. One day, Jerry jokingly asked his father if he had ever been tempted to dodge the draft. He said it to tease him a little. But the sharp look and firm response, never. Not in this damn life. Made it clear that it was never even an option. Jerry never joked about that again. Jerry actually knew a bit about his father's time in Vietnam. Frank had been stationed away from the main combat zones. But apparently not far enough, because a few years later he was involved in putting out a fire. He was seriously injured when shrapnel from an explosion struck his neck and legs. The neck injury eventually healed, but the leg wound was much more complicated. Since then, he had walked with a noticeable limp. Frank finished his 4-year tour in a hospital bed in Saigon, before being sent back to the States. It was a few years later that he met Edith, who became his wife. They got married and soon had their first daughter, Kelly. 2 years later, their second daughter, Kathy, was born. They had decided that 2 daughters were enough. So Edith took birth control pills, and for the next 10 years, they remained a family of 4. It was quite a surprise when Edith became pregnant again in her 30s. Along came their unexpected baby, Jerry, whom they loved just as deeply as their other 2 children, despite the surprise. When his wife returned home from work, Jerry told Olivia about his father's poor health. As expected, she had already used up all her vacation days during their last visit to see his father. She couldn't take more time off. So Jerry took a few days off the following week, left home on Friday evening after work, packed the car, and kissed his wife goodbye. His hometown was a 4-hour drive away, but he was in a hurry and tried to get there as quickly as possible. Just a few miles from his destination, he sent his sister a message, "Let's meet at the Casona Diner." "You know where it is, right?" Kelly replied with a text, "Yes. In 20 minutes." She was already waiting for him in a booth and waved when she saw him. Her light brown hair and fair features reminded him of their mother, who had been a natural blonde. Kathy also had light hair and a fair complexion. Jerry had always felt he resembled their father, although he was taller and had darker hair. He was also more muscular than his dad, with hair so dark it was nearly black, and he could grow a full beard in just a couple of weeks. Even if he shaved in the morning, by the time he came home from work in the evening, he already had noticeable stubble. Kelly jumped up from her seat, and they exchanged warm hugs and kisses. "I'm glad you came, Jerry." "Of course. I want to help." Jerry noticed the worry on her face. Something was seriously bothering her. They ordered coffee and each had a pastry. When the waitress walked away, Kelly cast a nervous glance at her younger brother, then quickly lowered her eyes. "I don't know how to say this to you," she said, staring at the table and biting her lip. "Just say it, Kelly. I can tell it's bothering you." "All right." She took a deep breath and exhaled. "Jerry, there's something you don't know about our family. It's about Uncle Tony. Okay, you remember that Mom and the Blaylocks were college friends." "I knew that. Mom and Aunt Agnes used to be roommates. They all went to the same college, that's where they met Uncle Tony." "I know that too. A couple of years after college, Mom met Dad at some party, and here we are." "So? Well, they all stayed friends after that. Mom and Dad got married, and a few years later, Tony and Agnes got married too." "Yeah. Mom was Agnes's maid of honor." "That's right. I don't know if you know this, but before you were born, Dad had to leave town for a few months to attend classes at a mechanics school. He was new at the company, and the training took place quite far from home. The company said he could come home only once during the course, and only for a couple of days. He used his veterans' benefits to pay for it. While he was away, I think Mom fell into a depression, and kind of lost her mind." "Lost her mind? What do you mean?" Kelly shook her head and blurted out, "She did something stupid, Jerry. She had an affair with Tony." "What?" He said it too loudly. Other customers turned to look, so he lowered his voice and said in a more controlled tone, "Mom. She had an affair. With Uncle Tony." "What the hell?" "Yes, Mom was a real idiot." "I see that now." Jerry leaned back in his chair, trying to process the shocking news. His mother had cheated on his father, with Tony Blaylock. "Unbelievable. When did you find out?" he asked her. Kelly looked away, guilt written all over her face. "I've known about it almost from the beginning." "How is that possible?" "I knew she was seeing him while Dad was away at that school. She used to hire a babysitter for us, and he would pick her up from the house. She said they were going out to dinner or to see a show. Dad and Tony were friends, and he was always around the house anyway. I just thought he was being kind, trying to cheer her up because she was so down about Dad being gone. You didn't think it was strange that he was picking her up and taking her to dinner? And by the way, where was Agnes? At the time, I didn't think it was anything unusual, Kelly said, sincerely trying to make him understand. Agnes was with them a few times, so she definitely knew what was going on. They would come to the house to pick Mom up, all of them laughing and chatting cheerfully as they left. It seemed pretty innocent. There were also times when he came to the house alone to take care of some small errand Mom needed help with. I thought he was just a friend helping out while Dad was away. That's all I believed back then, and Mom let me believe it. I didn't realize she was cheating on him until I got to high school. It took you that long? I'm really sorry, Jerry. I should have told you sooner. But I guess I was pretty naive back then. Now I know better. Don't let it bother you, Kelly. You were just a kid, you couldn't have understood what was really happening. There was a pause before Jerry asked, I assume Kathy knows too. She gave him a sad look. I can't keep secrets from her. You know us, we're sisters. Yes. I understand that. Jerry's head was spinning from the news. He had never expected anything like this. He watched his older sister fidget in her seat, her eyes darting around, as she took another breath. That was a bad sign. There's more, isn't there? Yes. Unfortunately. She answered sadly, this is really hard. I hate telling you this. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There have already been too many secrets. She looked him straight in the face and said firmly, Jerry, I'm not sure Dad is your biological father. What? Me? Holy crap. Seriously? Yes. I'm sorry. I think you might be Uncle Tony's biological son. Kelly's voice broke as she said it. Then she couldn't hold back anymore. She covered her face with her hands and began to sob softly, staring at her dark-haired brother, who sat there in stunned silence. You're joking. You have to be. A tear welled up in his eye, and he quickly wiped it away before she could see. No. But I wish I were, she replied, sniffling. Although I'm not completely sure. I hope I'm wrong. I talked to Mom about it a few days ago. She said she doesn't know for certain either. But she thinks she might have gotten pregnant by Tony. You were born just over 9 months after their affair began. And your resemblance to Tony is too strong to ignore. Dad never mentioned anything about it, so I don't think he ever considered the possibility, until, Kelly paused to stop sniffling and gather herself, until Mom let the cat out of the bag a few weeks ago. What a foolish woman she is. He was still recovering from his bypass surgery when she told him about the affair. Since then, Dad's been in a terrible depression. That's probably why he had the stroke, because he took the news so hard. Damn it, Jerry snapped angrily. He was seriously ill. Damn her. After all this time, what the hell made Mom open her big mouth, especially when he was in such a fragile state? It was probably a medication mix-up, Kelly said. That's what we all think. Mom's been on antidepressants for a while, you know how she is. But recently, she got a new doctor. I think she met him at the hospital when Dad was having his surgery. A new doctor? What for? Oh, I don't know. Mom's always been a hypochondriac. She wandered around the hospital and no doubt ran into a bunch of doctors. She must have talked one of them into taking her on as a patient. I'm guessing she didn't tell him about all the meds she was already on, because he gave her a new prescription for her nerves, and unfortunately, it conflicted with some of the ones she was already taking. It made her a little delusional, and she ended up blurting out the whole story to Dad during one of their arguments. Jerry leaned back in his chair, stunned, his mind racing as he tried to process all this new and unsettling information. So, he might not be my real father. Jerry said with a thoughtful sigh, "No. He is your real dad." Kelly exclaimed. "Oh my God, Jerry, please never think otherwise." I know. I know. Of course he is. You're absolutely right, Kelly. He's my father, and I love him. Whether he's my biological father or not, I know he loves me, he's always loved me. He will always be my real dad. Thank you, Kelly whispered through a sob, reaching across the table to take his hands. For a few painful moments, the brother and sister held hands and shared their sorrow. Kelly had hated telling her brother the truth, but he had to know. After a few moments, Jerry shook his head and said, "What a mess this is. Tony's a jerk for taking advantage of her, and Mom was an idiot. Poor Dad. I can only imagine how he feels about her betrayal. His family means everything to him. I can't believe Mom could be so incredibly foolish. A secret she kept for decades suddenly comes out just as Dad is fighting for his life. What are the odds of that? He didn't take it well at all. So, what's happening now? Is he still with the Blaylocks?" "Yes. At least for now. I can only imagine how much he must hate living under the same roof as his wife's former lover. But he's pretty helpless, and Mom absolutely refuses to go home to take care of him. She said she's too upset and needs Tony's support." Kelly added bitterly, "And of course, good old Uncle Tony is more than happy to help." She swallowed hard to suppress the bitterness, then continued, "But as expected, Dad hates him now. He's made that very clear to Tony. And he won't let Mom help him with anything, or Agnes either. So how is he living now? Not well at all. Of course, he needs help. Once Mom refused to step in, there was no one else, so they took him to the Blaylocks. Tony gave him a separate room in his house and hired a caregiver to look after him. He also has a physical therapist. Naturally, Tony can afford all that. Yeah. That bastard's loaded. We all know it. It's so sad, Jerry. I visit him regularly. But he doesn't want to talk to me or to Kathy. I think he found out that we knew, and didn't tell him. Now he feels like the whole family betrayed him. He's so depressed that I nearly cry every time I see him. I can imagine. Poor Dad. What a miserable payoff for all his hard work. He was a loyal husband and a great father his entire life. Honest, hardworking, a great provider, and look how it turned out. It's crap." The brother and sister sat in silence, staring down at the table, deep in thought. After a moment, Kelly looked across the table to meet her brother's eyes. "I know this is a shock for you. I didn't want to be the one to tell you," she admitted. "But I love you, Jerry. We all love you. Don't think this changes anything between us. Kathy knows I'm talking to you right now, and she feels the same way. She couldn't be here today, but she'll be here tomorrow. By the way, she sends her love. Thank you, Kelly. You'll always be my sister, no matter what. And Kathy too." Kelly signaled for the check and then asked him, "Are you ready to go see Dad?" "Yes. I really need to see him, and help him, if I can. I just hope he doesn't take it too hard. You know how he is." "Yes. He's always had a strong sense of justice. With him, it's either right or wrong, no gray areas. That's why it hurts so much. He can't accept Mom's apology or the reasons she gave for her behavior. He's a broken man, Jerry. I don't think he's said more than 3 words to Mom since everything came out. And he just glares at Tony with pure rage. I can't blame him, not even after all this time. Mom knew about her affair for decades, but for Dad, it's still a fresh wound in his heart. The love he thought she had for him is now forever dimmed." "Humph. That's definitely not how Mom sees it," Kelly said sarcastically. "She acts like she just told him she dented the car. Mom says the affair is ancient history and that she hasn't been with Tony in years. She doesn't understand why he's taking it so hard. I told her that the fact her affair ended long ago doesn't make it any less painful for Dad. To him, the betrayal hit just now, and he's still hurting. He's still deeply upset. Jerry and Kelly drove separately. As they pulled into the long driveway, Jerry recognized the familiar sight of the Blaylocks' large house. It was a two-story mini-mansion with a vast landscaped yard, a swimming pool, and a circular flower garden. Uncle Tony owned 3 car dealerships and several other businesses. His home was a symbol of wealth in their small community. Frank Kilroy and Anthony Blaylock had always been an unusual pair of friends. Tony's business success, in contrast to Kilroy's modest financial standing, had made their friendship a mystery for many years. Of course, now that Jerry knew about Tony's affair with his mother, it all made a lot more sense. At the door, they were met by Aunt Agnes, who looked somber. Kelly and Agnes hugged and exchanged kisses, then Jerry embraced the older woman. The hug was stiff and awkward as they pulled apart. She was still an attractive woman, slim, well-dressed, with perfectly styled silver hair. "Thank you for coming, Jerry," Agnes said seriously. "I hope seeing you here will lift your father's spirits." "I hope so too." As they were led into the living room, Uncle Tony appeared. He was over 6 feet tall, and his solid frame was dressed in an expensive silk suit. On his feet were polished dress shoes that looked just as costly. With a confident smile, the older man stepped forward, hugged Kelly, and shook Jerry's hand. Jerry noticed his slick-back black hair streaked with gray. It gave him a distinguished look. "Good to see you again, Jerry," Tony said with a smile. "I wish it were under better circumstances. But I'm really glad you're here." "I am too. Tony." Jerry had almost said Uncle Tony, but stopped himself. "Would either of you like a drink?" "No, thank you," Kelly replied, and Jerry simply shook his head. "Where's Dad?" he asked. "In the study," Tony said, proudly gesturing toward a large room. "We had it set up just for him when he was discharged. Fully functional hospital bed, motorized wheelchair, everything he needs. If he needs anything, just ask." "Of course." Jerry and Kelly left the tall man and headed toward what had once been the den. Jerry was stunned by how small and helpless his father looked. The strong, confident man he had looked up to all his life was now a shriveled shell of who he once was. His head was tilted to the side as he gazed listlessly at his visitors. He sat in his wheelchair near the window. Jerry walked up and hugged him. Frank lifted the arm that still worked and weakly shook his son's hand. "Hi, Dad." "Sorry to hear you had a setback," Jerry said, trying to start a conversation. Frank gave a faint nod. His face was expressionless, but his eyes were fixed on his son's face. He tried to say something, but the words came out slurred and incomprehensible. Jerry leaned in closer to hear the man's weak words. At first, he began to pull away, nodding as if he understood. But Frank firmly held his son's hand, trying with all his strength to repeat the words over and over until he saw something familiar in Jerry's eyes. During their strained conversation, Tony and Agnes quietly left the room to give them some privacy. Jerry finally understood. His father was telling him that he loved him and that he would always be his son. Jerry felt tears welling in his eyes. He heard soft sobbing beside him and glanced at Kelly. She had heard Frank too and was now crying, covering her face with her hands. Jerry began to choke up as well. "I love you too, Dad," Jerry said to the old man, his voice trembling. "I love you, and I always will. I heard about what happened with Mom. But that doesn't mean a damn thing to me. Nothing between us changes. It never will, Dad." Frank lifted one arm. The other barely functioned. Jerry finally understood. He wanted one more hug. He leaned in again, and his father's working arm pulled him in with surprising strength. He didn't let go right away. His mouth was near Jerry's ear, trying to whisper something. Jerry had to listen carefully to make it out. Frank's words were slurred, but he was saying something that Jerry could clearly feel was very important. Something vaguely familiar, yet unintelligible. Maybe Frank was so emotional that his words came out too garbled to understand exactly what he meant. Jerry could sense that his father was starting to get frustrated, so he pulled back, feeling awkward and a bit ashamed that he couldn't understand him. They stayed with Frank a little longer while Jerry talked about his wife and shared various trivial details about his work and family life. But when he mentioned that he wanted to see his mother, Frank's expression turned sour. He looked away from his son and fell silent. "I'll be back soon, Dad." Frank gave no indication that he'd heard him. Edith was sitting in the large, elegantly decorated kitchen, sipping coffee. There were empty plates on the table, so she must have just finished eating. His mother was wearing a colorful printed robe and slippers. Her hair was neatly styled, and she had on a bit of makeup. When she saw her son enter the room, her face lit up with a smile. She stood up as Jerry walked in and hugged him tightly. "Oh, Jerry," she said, blushing. "It's so good to see you. I'm so glad you came." "Kelly called me," Jerry replied. "So I came to see Dad." He looked her in the eye. "She told me something interesting. About you and Tony. Quite the story." "I'm so sorry I kept you in the dark, sweetheart," Edith said with a hint of sadness in her eyes. "But I didn't want to upset you or your father. You can see how hard this has hit him. I wish I'd never said a word." What the hell, Jerry thought. Yet she didn't seem all that upset, and he was a bit shocked by how well she was handling it. Her confession had likely been the reason her husband had a stroke. Jerry had expected her to be ashamed of her infidelity, or at least more remorseful, considering it was her fault. "I don't know what came over me," she continued with a sigh. "I knew it would hurt Frank to find out about the affair. That's why I never told him. It was something just between Tony and me, and Agnes, of course. It never interfered with my marriage or affected Frank all these years." "How long did it go on?" Jerry asked in a neutral tone. "Oh, for a while, on and off," his mother said casually. "Tony and I dated a bit back in school, before he married Agnes. It wasn't anything serious. Everyone was dating everyone back then. Agnes had a couple of guys she was seeing from time to time while Tony and I were dating. We were all such good friends, even after Tony and I broke up and he started dating Agnes. We were still close, the three of us would always go to parties together and things like that." As she told her story, her gaze drifted from her son's concerned face to a vague spot on the wall. It was clear she was reminiscing about a very fond time in her life. With a thoughtful expression, she confessed. "Even after Frank and I got married, we still saw Tony and Agnes quite often. We met up regularly, they came to our wedding, and we visited them, too. It was such a fun time. When we had Kelly and Kathy, it felt like one big happy family, all six of us, I mean. I wish it had never ended." Suddenly, her expression grew more severe. "But when your father left me to go to those damn classes, I felt so alone. I was taking care of your sisters by myself and managing everything at home. It was just too much. Tony helped me get through that difficult time. I would have lost my mind without his support. When your father came back, I stopped seeing Tony as often. We still managed to meet, just not as frequently. He was so kind about everything. He took me all over town and introduced me to so many people. You know, he really is a great man." "I hope you didn't say that to Dad," Jerry asked, bristling. Edith was startled by his outburst and blurted out, "Say what to him?" "That the guy his wife cheated on him with is such a great man." Jerry snapped. "A wonderful guy he considered a friend? A friend who basically stabbed him in the back. You really think it's okay to tell that to a sick, broken old man?" "Oh, don't be like that, Jerry," she snapped back, frowning. "Of course I know that. It's easy to judge me now." She waved him off dismissively. "You know I'm not stupid." And I didn't say it to him like that. I just told him the truth about what happened back then. He should appreciate that I was honest. I'm sure Dad was thrilled to hear the truth, Jerry said sarcastically. He may not be thrilled about it, she replied irritably. But now that he knows, he'll just have to deal with it. It's all in the past, and it's too late to worry about it now. Besides, Frank has far bigger problems to worry about than some silly affair I had years ago. I'll try to help him cope with it as much as I can, but he has to help himself too. I'm sure you will, Jerry spat bitterly, disgusted by his mother's casual attitude towards something so serious that he abruptly turned on his heel and walked out before he exploded in anger over his foolish mother and her reckless behavior. He had wanted to ask about his origins, but he was too upset now. That conversation would have to wait for another day. Kelly was nearby and must have heard his angry response. She came in, sat down next to their mother, and gave Jerry a strange look as he left the room. Jerry went to the library to think. Through the sliding glass doors leading to the back patio, he saw Agnes sitting at a table, sipping coffee. He stepped outside and joined her at the table. She hugged him and poured him a cup of coffee as they began to chat. We never thought it was wrong, Agnes said honestly. Edith and I were so close back then. We were roommates, you know. We used to do everything together. As she said this, she gave Jerry a bold, unapologetic look. She was dating Tony before I was. But even after I started seeing him, she still came along on our dates. I think Tony still had feelings for her. So it just felt natural for her to be around. She was such a sweet girl, everyone loved her, and I really enjoyed her company. So did Tony. We didn't think it was anything bad. So when Dad went away for those classes, Jerry asked cautiously, you and Tony just started inviting her over? Yes. Dinner, dancing, drinks, and laughter, she sighed, gazing off into the distance, reliving those memories. Oh God, Jerry, we had so much fun back then. Edith, Tony, and I were like the Three Musketeers. Your father didn't like going out very much. He was more of a homebody and didn't give your mother much attention when it came to social life. He was probably working too hard, for his family. Maybe, Agnes agreed immediately. I don't think he was making much money back then. But you're right, he really did work hard. So when he left for that training program, it felt completely normal for Tony and me to include your mom in our plans, just like back in college. We had such a great time. So, you agreed to Tony's affair? I suppose I did, she said carelessly. Tony's a handsome guy, you know. We were always social people. I knew there was a chance he might cheat on me. I felt that if he was going to stray, it was better that it happened with Edith than with anyone else. She wasn't going to try to steal him from me, and we were already very close. It just felt like a natural arrangement. Like I said, we didn't think it was wrong. She glanced at Jerry and noticed the angry look on his face. She reached out and patted his hand. Oh, don't be upset, darling. No one got hurt. I mean, none of this would have even come up if Edith hadn't blurted it out the other day. And don't be too hard on your mom. She was alone, and Tony caught her at a moment of weakness. He can be very persuasive, you know. She let out a clucking laugh. He really is charming. Always has been, always will be. Jerry felt even more disgusted than he had when he left his mother. Neither of them seemed to think there was anything wrong with the affair with Tony, nothing worth regretting. He left the older woman alone with her pleasant memories of days gone by and went back into the house. His thoughts were troubled until, suddenly, it hit him, what his father had been trying to say earlier, tools. He wants his damn tools. Jerry exclaimed, excited that he had finally figured it out. Frank had always been proud of his tools. He owned a professional-grade set he had purchased many years ago and kept stored in his garage. Back when money was tight, those tools had cost him a fortune. To Frank, they had always symbolized his skill and identity as a master mechanic. Jerry figured it was nostalgia, his father probably wanted them nearby to remind him of better days. He returned to his father's room and saw him staring out the window. "Your tools, right, Dad?" Jerry asked proudly. "You want me to bring you your old tools from the garage?" The old man's bitter frown instantly vanished. His eyes lit up, and he began nodding eagerly. "All right. I know where they are. I think you want them here, with you. I'll go get them, Dad. I'll be right back." Jerry drove to his childhood home. It wasn't far. He had his own key and let himself into the garage, memories flooding back of those long days he spent sitting there, watching his father work on cars, trying to earn a little extra money on the side for their struggling family. It was just like him, taking on side jobs so he could afford a few extra things for his wife and kids. He was a wonderful father. Jerry felt a sad tear roll down his cheek, and he wiped it away. He just wished his dad could be spared the pain of knowing that his wife had been cheating on him all those years with his best friend. Jerry brought the tools back to Uncle Tony's house. Tony had left, but his mother, Kelly, and Agnes were in the middle of a heated conversation in the kitchen. They didn't even notice when he walked through the house and headed straight to his father's room. Despite everything, Jerry couldn't help but notice how excited his father was to see his tools again. He waved his good arm in the air, pointing to the corner. Jerry placed the toolbox where he indicated and sat down beside him. They didn't speak. They both knew it was too difficult to understand him. Jerry simply looked at the old man with all the love he had. He could see his father's eyes, staring out from his damaged face, those sharp, alert eyes that now seemed even brighter than before. As Jerry stood to leave, Frank motioned for one more hug. This time, they embraced for a long while. The old man didn't want to let go. Tears welled up in his eyes and streamed down his cheeks as they finally pulled apart. "You're going to make me cry," Jerry admitted openly, feeling quite emotional. He said to the old man, "I'll be back tomorrow, Dad. Don't worry, I'll help you get back on your feet. I didn't know everything that was going on before, but I do now. I'm here for you, and I'm going to help you. You'll be better than ever in no time, you hear me, Dad?" Frank nodded enthusiastically. He watched closely as his tall, muscular, dark-haired son walked out of the room. Jerry and Kelly left together. She was eager to go, as there seemed to be some tension between her and the two older women. She didn't tell him what it was about. But as she passed by Jerry, she whispered, "Mom's a damn stupid witch." "What?" Kelly shrugged but didn't say anything out loud. Then she added, "Jerry, you can stay with me if you don't have a hotel room. I'd be happy to have you. Of course, if you don't mind." They drove to Kelly's place and talked for a long time about what their family was going to do next. When Jerry began to feel tired, he went to the room Kelly had prepared for him. He was undressing in the bedroom when he suddenly heard a loud explosion in the distance. Even from far away, it was so powerful that it shook the windows of the house. He ran out of the room and nearly collided with Kelly. "What the hell was that?" she asked, looking alarmed. They both looked outside and saw a glow in the distance, as if a large fire was burning somewhere nearby. "Oh, damn," Jerry muttered as a terrible thought struck him. "God, I hope I'm wrong. But I think we'd better go back to Tony's." "Why?" "I just need to check on Dad." She wanted to know why, but he didn't say. Jerry went back to his room and was dressed in under a minute. Kelly quickly got ready too and rode with him as he drove back to the Blaylock mansion. It was about half an hour after the explosion. When they turned the final corner, they saw the flashing emergency lights of fire trucks and police cars in front of the Blaylock house. Tony's home was nearly destroyed. It looked like the lower level had exploded, and the rest of the house had collapsed in flames. Firefighters were dragging hoses, spraying water, and doing everything they could to put out the blaze. But it seemed like a losing battle. Most of the house was already gone. "Oh God!" Kelly sobbed. "Mom and Dad. Are they dead?" "I'm afraid so," Jerry said, holding his crying sister in his arms. They told the police who they were, and an officer simply shook his head. "I don't think anyone could have survived," he said sadly. "When we arrived, the house was already engulfed in flames. No one could have made it out. It looks like there was some kind of explosion, maybe a gas leak. We'll investigate and determine the cause. But there's nothing more we can do tonight. I'm sorry for your loss." Jerry took Kelly home. They sat in the living room, barely sleeping. The next day, they returned to the house and saw detectives sifting through the smoldering remains. Jerry introduced himself, and they allowed him to come closer. The detectives questioned him about what he knew. Jerry didn't mention the tools he had brought. He told them he believed there had been 4 people in the house. "Did you find anything?" Jerry asked anxiously. "Any sign of my parents?" "Yes, we did find 4 bodies," the officer replied, continuing his explanation. 3 of them appear to have been on the upper floor. The area was so badly damaged that it's hard to say for sure. We'll have to identify them later during the autopsy. The officer glanced at them sideways and said, "Funny thing, the 4th body. It was hard to be certain, but we believe it was downstairs, in the kitchen." "The kitchen?" Kelly asked. "But Dad stayed in the den." "Yeah. Well, this body was found in the kitchen," the officer continued. "We know because it was right next to the stove, or what was left of it." "What does that mean?" Jerry asked. "Well, just don't tell anyone I told you this," the man said, leaning in and speaking confidentially. "But since you're family, I think the problem was with the stove, that it was a gas explosion. Actually, I'm pretty sure of it." "Really?" "Yes. The gas line was disconnected. I don't know how it happened. The connection was damaged, but it survived the blast. From experience, I can tell there wasn't a leak, the disconnection was deliberate." The man leaned in even closer and began to speak quietly to the brother and sister. "Funny thing, the body near the disconnected gas line was holding a wrench." "In his hand?" Kelly asked in surprise. "Wasn't it blown off in the explosion?" "No. The wrench was attached to his hand. Literally tied to it with wire," the man said, with an almost amused look on his face. He wiped the smile away and continued more soberly. "Apparently, he or she must have intentionally disconnected the line, then the gas leaked and blew up the house." "But why the wire?" "The wire was wrapped around his hand a couple of times, and he was holding the wrench. I've never seen anything like it. Why would someone tie a wrench to his hand?" "I don't know," Jerry said. "Maybe he wanted to make sure the wrench wouldn't fly off in the explosion, so it would be clear he did it, not just someone who happened to be nearby. I can't think of another reason." "All right," the officer agreed cautiously. Jerry glanced at his sister's worried face. As she began to speak, he quickly interrupted her to stop her, then turned to the detective and said, "Thank you for the information, officer. Good luck. Here's my card, in case you have any questions," the man said politely, handing him his business card. "I'm sorry about your parents. I don't know exactly what happened, but right now it doesn't look like an accident." As they walked away, Jerry and Kelly exchanged a look. Now he was certain that his father had finally taken revenge on his unfaithful wife and her lover, or lovers, if Agnes was involved, and Jerry had every reason to believe she was. He was sure Frank had wanted to make sure his son knew that it was him delivering that final act of vengeance. This was no accident. Jerry whispered sadly, "Message received, Dad." He embraced his sobbing sister. Jerry felt sorrow over the loss of his mother, and a bit of sadness for the loss of Uncle Tony and Aunt Agnes. After all, they had been so close to him while he was growing up. But he couldn't help but feel a deep respect for his father, a proud soldier and a man of honor, now reduced to a weak, nearly helpless figure worn down by illness, who still found the strength to avenge the greatest humiliation a man can face. It was so like his father. "God, I love you, Dad," Jerry allowed himself to sob. "I'm going to miss you. Thank you for being with us." And if you're one of those who watches silently, just leave a like, it helps new stories come to light.